to arms!
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to You Can't Say That. I'm Greg.
Yes, and I am Al. Good to see you. Good to see you, Greg. How you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
Yeah, life is great.
What are you eating?
Considering. What?
What are you eating?
Oh, you caught me. I've been caught.
I was going to make
Let's
coffee,
just
but I wouldn't be able to drink it out of that cup until after we were already done, so I didn't bother. Oh, look at that. You're making me
Well,
jealous.
see, my son-in-law and daughter went to Vegas and got me a Trump. This is a Trump mug. What do you think about that? Woo!
How much did they pay for it?
I don't know. They stayed at one of his hotels, I guess. So it wasn't a political mug. It was just a Trump mug. So
I think
kinda
Trump
cool.
is destined to always be political for the rest of his days. You can't unpolitify Trump anymore. He's in. It's too late for that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think you're right.
All right, so the show today, me give an overview of topics, and we can talk about your stuff. Talk about yours first.
Okay.
I've just got basically two things. One, we're talking about that day when Democrats praised protesters storming the Capitol building. People seem to have forgotten. And also, I've got kind of an overview of the first few days of the Biden administration, and I just, want to kind of touch on the hypocrisy maybe a little bit. And then you were looking at the recall project for the governor of California.
Yeah.
And you found a good one with the troops in D.C. So you want to start with that?
Well, the troops in D.C., there was kind of an eerie thought in my mind where you have a couple of things converging all at the same time. So we have this impeachment that's going on, and they've said, we need to hold the troops just a little bit longer through the impeachment. And the impeachment won't start until February sometime. But we're going to hold off and hold those troops there. And I get this, it's a kind of a spine-chilling feeling that we are now bringing some guy that is not the president anymore, and we're going after him to impeach him, whatever that means, since he's not the president, and impeachment means removal from office. I'm not really sure, but I get it, all the things that come with that impeachment. But then we got these troops there that we got to keep there, this military that has to surround our capital because of the insurrection dangers that could happen.
Well, the story I've found is from Military Times. The headline, thousands of Guard troops to stay in Washington as threats target lawmakers ahead of impeachment trial. So they're not just sticking around. They're already going to stick around through March. So we already now have a 2-month military occupation of the nation's capital. And I'm not sure who was here last week when we talked about how everything now looks like the Hunger Games. Which is kind of a joke. It was a little bit of a joke because of Lady Gaga's, Mockingjay Pen and her Katniss-looking dress and the razor wire. But if I'd have said Thursday when we were talking about that, hey, everybody, just so you know, the troops are never going to leave. They're going to find a reason to keep them there because we're now under a military occupation. This is what this is what it's like in the Hunger Games. This is what it was like in Nazi Germany. This is what it's like today. It's where we are. People would have told me I was insane, but here we are. The troops are now going to stay till March. They found a good excuse.
Let's talk. What does there's a couple of things in play, I think, for me at least, as an image. Like when I look at it, one of them is just the immediate thing that says, hey, we have to have troops because Trump is a wacko and his armies are going to come and take down what was constitutionally correct, or a process that we went through to get a new president. But this maniac is not okay with that, and he wants to take over. So that's an immediate image they want to give out to all the people, saying, hey, don't associate with Trump. That guy's a nutcase, and we need the military because he's planning another attack. So I think that's one image they're trying to put out there to both Trump supporters and also to the Democrats to reinforce their idea that Trump is a nut. So I think you got two things going, which will kind of soften up his base a little bit to think, gosh, is Trump really doing this? Now, the long-term thing that you're talking about, will we have an occupation of force there that we've never had for the next at least 4 years? I don't know. Now, that's to be seen. Will it be needed once you kind of squelch everything and we impeach Trump and now we're kind of back to the business as usual and they got a nice strong grip? Do they keep razor wire and all that stuff up? I don't know.
Well, if you recall, they put up temporary barriers to protect the White House during the Obama administration because of that guy that managed to scale the fence. And so they temporarily they temporarily backed everybody off, won't let you go near the fence till they got all that figured out. But if you look, we're now 10 years down the road from that, and they never got rid of it. They never figured it out so that people could stand there and outside the gate and look at the White House, take pictures. Now you have to stand across two barriers and a service, like a security service road, and they've backed the public way back off of the White House when all they were going to do was come up. That was a temporary solution while they dealt with the security issue. It's not a temporary solution. These things are never. The Patriot Act was only supposed to protect us in the aftermath of 9/11 from terrorism. Well, that's done. It's 20 years later. Guess what? All the provisions of the Patriot Act are not only still there, they keep adding to them and they get more expansive. So the idea that as we move into a militarized occupation of our country, which is what we're starting to see now, that it's just going to go away. Well, nothing else ever went away. Why would this go away?
Okay. Let me ask you what your thoughts are on the military itself, because normally the military, I would say, have probably predominantly quote unquote Republican or Trumpish style people in the military. It usually doesn't seem like you got a lot of military law enforcement unless they're union and there's some other issue there that are really strong supporters of Democrats.
Well,
do you agree with that or no?
We don't have the same. It's not like it used to be. I mean, back in the 80s, when we started to embark on redoing the military, making it and this started in the 70s in the aftermath of Vietnam, and 10 years later in the late 80s, they were trying to figure this out. And what they wanted to know was if we wanted our military to occupy the U.S., if we wanted them to take over a city, if we wanted them to shoot at civilians because they're terrorists or secessionists or whatever, will they do it? And they polled the military in the late 80s, and they found out no, they would not do it. So they went on when Bill Clinton, it started under George Bush's dad, and Bill Clinton kicked it into high gear, and they started changing the training and the recruiting, who they looked for, the type of people they wanted to recruit, and they keep close tabs on them. They take a lot of psychological exams now because what they're trying to do is to fill a paid serviceman military with people who will follow orders without questioning what those orders are, even if those orders are to shoot at us. And they keep retesting that same question. And now, instead of, I can't remember what it was in the 80s, I think it was like 15% of the military said, oh yeah, if they tell me to shoot at civilians, I'll do it. Now it's flip-flopped. Now a majority of them are saying they'll follow orders. And they're going to follow orders, Al, because they're not shooting innocent citizens. They're going to be shooting insurrectionists. Right. And that makes it okay. So you were right 30 years ago. And that's why they embarked on this aggressive change in recruiting and training in the military, because they don't want their questions ordered. They don't want the orders questioned. And
no, I get you.
They're not all the way there, and there are plenty of pockets of resistance to that in the military, but it's no longer the predominant control of our military is not those kinds of people anymore.
Well, and it's a tough line. I mean, I find a fine line the military has to go with. You don't want every military person questioning every order. I mean, you're going to have chaos in the military. You got to have people, and that's right. That's part of the military, and it is a fine line.
And we had that before. That wasn't good enough for them. My point is that's what we had. We never had trouble with our military following orders. What they decided to go was the next step. Well, you all follow our orders, but what if we want you to kill these people that live in that house over there on that street? Will you do that? And they said no. And that wasn't acceptable. They're not just trying to get them to follow orders because they need order. They're trying to get them to follow a certain order that they feel they're going to want to give. Otherwise, why would you build a military that would shoot at civilians if you didn't plan on shooting civilians? That's just a ridiculous notion. And I talked about this 30 years ago, Al, and people looked at me like I'm crazy. And now we're on the other side of it. Here it is. Here it is.
But let's not, right. There's been no indication so far there. If we try to look at this without too much thinking into it, but let's just hold on a second. So nothing has happened yet, and I got it. You don't want to wait for something to happen.
Nothing happens till it happens. They're taking the steps. I mean, I'm talking historically. Historically, when a civilization does what we're doing, I'm telling you, this is where it goes. And we're checking the boxes to do that. Will it be tomorrow? Will they start murdering us a year from now? I don't know. I'm just trying to tell everybody this is the path we're on, and we haven't gotten off. Not yet. We're not likely to get off because nobody even believes we're on that path, because it just sounds crazy. It sounds, in the United States of America, this is not something anybody was ever born into thinking they should have to deal with. Unfortunately, every civilization in the history of the world has fallen or will fall. It's how it works. It's just the way the world works. And the steps to that, you can see how they repeat themselves all over the place, all throughout history. It's the same stuff. And we don't have to go back 1,000 years. We only got to go back 100 years to watch this very same thing. Do you think when they put the first troops on the streets in Germany, there were probably people like me that said, this is not going to go well. People, you got to understand. And everybody was like, no, there are troops. It's all cool. It's for our safety. That was what Hitler sold them on. It was for safety. That's exactly what they're doing to us. Nobody wants to believe that that's where we're going to end up. But Al, if you do everything along the pathway to ending up there, you end up there. Whether you think,
Right, so I don't want to get like that, all is lost. So I think a good thing that we bring up.
I'm not saying all is lost. I'm saying everybody needs to get off their butt and do something about this.
Right, so it is a good thing. So I think for the listeners and the viewers is eyes open. And I think it would be great if we have listeners and viewers that can kind of watch this stuff too and feed us with information. And that way we can kind of monitor it and make sure that people are aware. I think one thing, though, when I watched Trump and I watched a lot of the rallies and I watched a lot of groups come out, I find that there are a lot more little pockets of resistance all over the country in different forms, but really sensitive to what is going on. And we may think when we look at this broad brush, oh, yeah, they got it. The Democrats are just walking on. I don't think that's the case. I am somewhat optimistic in my view that there are pockets. It's not just a pushover. There are pockets of people that aren't just going with it. And let me give one case, Greg, and this is the thing. In the years past, I think there have been a lot of elections that have been frauded elections. They've been they just put the person they want. Never before in the history of America do I remember seeing 1 million people come to Washington because they are not happy about the fraud. Now, not that anything was done because it just seemed like it pushed over. But we are not dumb anymore. Our eyes are open to an extent. The question is, what do you do about it? That's a great question, because over history, it usually seems that people in the dominant seat, have the little bit of the upper hand. But America's not dumb. Let me just put it that way. We're sensitive to this fact. So I think the thing is right now, hey, get the eyes open.
I think
let's
some
figure out what we
people
do.
are, but I think you're overestimating people, and you're overestimating how much resistance there really is. And resistance is there's always resistance in these things, and they kill those people out. They scare the daylights out of them. They threaten them. They take away remember, the government now controls our health care. They control our employment. They control our food supply. They control once they control everything, if you won't behave, they take it away. And they're going to scare those pockets of resistance into submission because people are fearful. Fear works at controlling people. It worked last century. It worked the century before that. It worked 1,000 years ago. It worked 2,000 years ago. It has always worked.
Okay.
We'll have to see what happens.
Back at me on this. I know you're going to shoot back at me on this, Greg, but the only thing I can say to you is we had a history up to 2016, and then an anomaly happened in 2016 where a person that had never been in, had no political structure, nothing, won. So I'm going to leave it at that because I know we could talk about this all day long. I'm just saying that there are people that are keen on seeing this, and they voted for a guy named Trump.
Sure.
Over the establishment and over 16 other established Republicans. It can happen, and the only message in that is that people were sensitive to the fact of something that they liked about him that was different.
Well, and you're absolutely right, and that's why changes had to be made. That's why.
I got you.
That's why our elections are all fraud now. That's why it won't matter how many people go vote for the next whoever. But
Greg, the only thing I'm saying,
what you're saying is exactly right, and that's why all these steps are being taken, because the people who really control our civilization can't allow that to happen again, and so they've taken steps to ensure that it doesn't.
We could have said steps were being made to not let anybody get in that wasn't a diehard government person, but it didn't work because in 2016, which was just the last election, they couldn't stop it. So I'm just saying it can happen again. It's never totally lost because look what happened.
Well, what are you going to do? How are you going to overcome the election fraud? How are you going to overcome the police state? How are you going to overcome the surveillance state? I mean, we're being spied on. You mean it's not of course it happened in 2016 because they didn't think that would happen. And they're not stupid now. They know it can happen. And all the stuff I've been complaining about, these are the things they put in place to ensure it doesn't happen again. I hope you're right.
We said that
I just don't think you are.
50 years ago. 50 years ago, they could have said they put things in place to ensure something wouldn't happen. And it did.
But they didn't.
2016.
We didn't have
whatever the technology was.
We didn't have this problem.
New technologies will arise. New ways of dealing with this. We'll disagree on it. I think we agree on something on the gist of it, that we are going, as all governments do, go in a bad direction over time. So Americans, wake up. All right, what's the next one?
So now you got the recall of the governor.
Yes. Well, it just seems that California is getting better now, right? Now they're starting to open up and all these wonderful things. I heard about this recall thing, I think back in October. Maybe it was October. Glenn Beck had a guy on the show that was just starting the recall thing. It might have started earlier than that last year, but in October, they were like on the cusp of recalling this guy. They almost had they were thinking that by January, February, they would have enough votes. I think they have till the end of March to get 1.5 million votes that are needed in the recall. And they got 1.2 million already. And wow, I'm thinking interesting. Now, we recalled, if you remember, it was on the tip of my tongue, but Schwarzenegger became the governor back with,
wow, that's been a while.
Whoever the governor was. But they did the recall. You got Schwarzenegger.
Governor Brown? Are you talking about Governor Brown in California?
It wasn't Brown before. Before it was Schwarzenegger, it was another Republican, Pete something, or maybe, but he got recalled, and then you got Schwarzenegger in for 2 terms. did okay kind of in the beginning of the first term and then got bought out, sold out to every liberal cause there was. And I can see him. I see him on the news now, Schwarzenegger. He's a danger, man. That guy's a danger to people. He really is a
Al,
nutcase
there was a
now.
time when all these idiotic, stupid conservatives, Republicans, right-wingers wanted to change the Constitution so that Arnold Schwarzenegger could run for president. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
Do you remember
yep.
that? And do you know, I'm a broken record on these things, but do you know how much flack I took by telling all of those people, you're insane. You have no idea what the politics of Arnold Schwarzenegger are. And you will back off on this idea when down the road, because you're going to find out how stupid and idiotic that really is. And here we are. We now know he was just a closet liberal in a liberal family pretending to be a conservative.
Yeah.
He was no Ronald Reagan. But, and this, I just, it gets so tiring.
But we didn't change the law. But we didn't change it. So obviously, I think majority of people knew that. Yeah, but I think a majority of the people, you had this honeymoon thing where you think, oh, look at this guy, Terminator, he's going to come in. Yeah, you got it. I think people wake up. It's a little fantasy for a while, maybe, that this is the guy that's going to do everything. But, I mean, I think if there's ever been anybody, it's more Trump than anybody else that's actually come in, said, I'm going to do some things, did it, and that people love him. And, he may be the next person everybody's relying on. And it may not be Trump. Maybe we may have another versions of Trump that come down the path. But let's go back to this recall. So I looked up the recall thing, and it seems like I was trying to think, gosh, can't we do that with U.S. senators too? I mean, we got Kane and Warner. Let's get them out. But I guess the Constitution, they say, doesn't provide for congressional people, senators or House members or vice presidents.
No, they can only be impeached.
Governor. Yeah, they can only be impeached.
Right.
That's going to be a tougher one. It would be great if you could just recall Kane. I mean, if we could just recall our U.S. senators, put some pressure on them, because here is my whole deal on this recall.
What good would that do, Al? They would just they just elect, Terry McAuliffe would be our next senator. Who cares?
I got you. But here's my thing. But Greg, here's my thing on Newsom. You know that Newsom was married to the woman that is now engaged to one of the Trump sons?
Really?
Eric Trump or Donald Trump. One of them had gotten divorced and is dating a lady now. That lady was Newsom's wife.
I don't doubt it.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing. So it's amazing, that connection between a liberal government. But anyway, here's the deal.
It's amazing that Trump might it's amazing that Trump might and his family might actually have been a part of the political class, and we're just now seeing the connections. Remember all those years when the Bushes and the Clintons would act like they were arch enemies, and then we'd see these photographs of them at cocktail parties, patting each other on the back, looking at chicks' butts and drinking together. Do you think they really all hate each other, or are they part of a club and it's Club Control America? And
Greg,
that's just the way it works.
Not to deviate from this subject, but let me and don't answer this question, because this could be a 5-minute conversation. Do you think one day that you're going to see Obama's arm around Trump? Now, if that happens and Trump and Clinton both have their arms around Trump after 2020, not before, because maybe there are pictures, but post-election, then you got me. And that picture I'll be waiting for. Okay, let's go back. It could happen. But let's go back to this recall thing. It does seem like the recall is putting a little squeeze on Newsom, who all of a sudden seems to be opening up California. And I'm thinking maybe this is the way in some states with this lockdown is to start recalling the governors. I'm thinking in the whole state of California, you can't get 1.5 million people that want the governor gone, then you're a bad population in California.
Well, they probably can, but they're not going to get any different governor. They're just going to get a communist governor. I mean, why does it matter having communist A or communist B be your governor?
Oh, it matters to communist A. I mean, Newsom does not want to lose power.
It matters to him.
Yeah, but he doesn't want to lose power. So that's where legally you can shift a guy to do what you want him to do, right? Because he doesn't want to lose power. Newsom doesn't want to leave the governor's mansion, even if it's to another communist.
Well,
he wants to stay in power.
And there's some things obviously that have ticked some people off, but Californians in a great majority, they want a socialist state. They want high taxes that pays for all of their education, and they want illegals coming across the border to take care of. In general, they want these things. Of course, all that is destructive to a civilization. You can't manage a state or a country that way. They're too stupid to know that, but they want it anyway. So I get it. It's interesting to see a group that big, do this, but ultimately, California has the government that Californians want.
I disagree.
So you think, that there's a majority of Californians that want something different, but they just keep electing leftist Democrats and getting what they don't want?
You and I both know. I think a lot of times the person that's elected, politics is a strange deal. When you got 40% of the population voting, the other is apathetic, the structure that's created gets the vote out of a certain group. I just can't necessarily say that the majority of Californians, like the majority of people in San Francisco, want feces on their street, want people urinating.
I get it.
They don't want that.
Let me be more specific. A majority of those who are going to vote and have been voting in California are getting the government that they want. It may not be a majority of Californians. All right, but if they're not taking part in the process, then what they want doesn't really matter. They're not going to get it.
Understood.
And in California, though, that's part of the reason why those people.
That's what they're getting.
Yeah, but in California, that's part of the reason why those people don't participate. Is because no matter what they've done, it's never changed anything, and it continues to get worse. A lot of them finally just gave up, or moved.
I would agree to that.
I
would agree to that. But let me just wrap up this recall thing.
All right.
So I think there's one tactic, because we've got to look for tactics that don't cause destruction and chaos and bloodshed. We still have to look for those, even though I know you're pulling your hair out saying we've been trying this for so long. We still have to look for some that can do it. And I think the recall thing, at least what I'm seeing in California, possibly that's a strategy. It would have been nice here in Virginia last year to start recalling Northrop, because I tell you, whatever the percentage of how many votes you needed, I think we could have gotten and maybe pushed him to do the right thing.
Well, sure, but so we would have recalled the racist, and then they would have put the woman molester as our governor while we had a special election, which would then elect Terry McAuliffe to be our governor.
Possibly. But the only thing I'm saying is pressure on the guy. Northrop does not want to leave the governor's mansion, in a bad way. He doesn't want to be recalled. He doesn't want that on his resume. I'm just telling you. Yeah, it's egotistical as these people are. That could be to our benefit to use their egos a little bit.
Maybe.
And I think it's working with Newsom. I think we'll have to see what happens if he changes a lot of things in California.
That's true.
All right, I've taken up too much time.
It's okay. All right, so the first thing I wanted to touch on was that day when Nancy Pelosi praised protesters for storming the Capitol. So, all of a sudden now it's a bad thing for protesters that are being abused by their government to go to their government and cause trouble. But not so long ago, just in 2011, in Madison, Wisconsin, Nancy Pelosi thought it was a great idea if protesters stormed the Capitol in exactly the same way. Obviously, our political class, like humanity, is full of hypocrisy.
Absolutely.
So I know that there's nothing's going to be gained from that, and putting that in her face is going to make no difference whatsoever. She's still going to be against the people that stormed her Capitol, but totally cool with the people that stormed that other Capitol. It's just the way it's going to be. I just want to make sure people don't forget. They don't forget that it was just 9 years ago when Nancy Pelosi thought this was horrible. That this was great.
Right.
And now it's horrible. Right now it's an affront to freedom and democracy. But 9 years ago, storming the Capitol was democracy. Whatever is necessary to get the job done is the bullcrap they're going to tell us today. This is how it works in George Orwell. There's whatever lie the party is telling you,
Yeah. And
That's
it doesn't seem, I know it's frustrating for you and I because it seems so obvious. Like, and I have customers that come into my business and we talk about these political issues all the time. And sometimes it's frustrating me because it seems so obvious what is going on right now and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable and how they flip flop all the time. I just find it kind of humorous, but it is amazing.
I
It
would
is
think
amazing.
I would think it was funny if it weren't killing me. I mean, if it weren't keeping me angry, unhappy, and poor, I'd think it was funny too. But it's not funny. I'm absolutely sick of it.
Yeah.
I don't see the humor in abusing people. I don't see the humor in the abuse of power. I don't see the humor in being mean, hateful, fraudulent. I don't see what's funny about any of that. I mean, I get it, but and maybe
Right.
seeing the humor in it, keeps one from going crazy, right? But
Yeah. Well, I think that's our role is to constantly showcase and never let people forget what people have said and what they've done before and put it back in their face. I mean, you got to keep doing that while the avenues are open to do that, I guess, and before they shut the stuff down.
so my other thing was just I want to just kind of run through some stuff that happened in just the first few days of Biden being president. And this was a guy that wanted he claimed he wanted to unite us. Everybody watched that speech on inauguration night, and see he wants us all to be together. No, they only want us all to be together and being subservient to them. He doesn't want togetherness, real togetherness. He wants us all being together on following their orders. But that's
Right.
that's not
On
here or
their
there.
terms.
So let's see. We lost 52,000 jobs just in one sector in the first 48 hours because
Energy sector.
they've now
Energy.
gone to war against oil again. And
Yeah.
and it may not be. See, here's the dirty little secret about that is Democrat leaders may not really care personally oil versus solar versus wind. What they care about is what them and their friends are going to make money off of. And the left, the power structure of the left has chosen wind energy and solar energy to enrich themselves with. And the power structure of the right, they own oil companies and fracking businesses. So it's not that one hates the environment and one loves the environment. It's that both of them love the form of energy that they and their friends get rich using when people
Right.
use.
And there's a constituency along with each one of those, right? I mean, we talk about the votes, although it's hard to understand how much votes are going to count anymore, but there is a constituency that is to this renewable stuff, and there is a constituency that's to, oil, fossil fuel energy. So I guess it is kind of segmented by the votes you're going to get also from the different states and electoral votes associated with Pennsylvania or Ohio or whatever. Yeah, so you're playing that game also, along with investments that you're
Well,
making.
they don't have. I don't think they have to worry about the electoral issue anymore. I think they've solved losing elections,
Yeah.
and we're going to find out. We can argue about that for 4 years, but we're not going to find out until we get there.
Yeah, no, I
so
agree with that.
Canada and Texas are suing Biden. Now, this is the president that the world supposedly was so thankful we got rid of Trump because of how horrible he was for the whole world and how stupid he made us look. The man that replaced him, that's supposed to be the guy to fix that, is sued by one of our states and another country right off the bat. So,
Right.
what was this nonsense about Biden being a uniter, about Biden being the right one for the rest of the world?
Now, the suing is going on that energy deal because I guess that Keystone pipeline comes from Canada.
Correct.
Correct. So that's the suit. Because I heard that the first call that Biden made was to Canada, not to England, which England would be our biggest ally in the world,
Well,
or Israel. I would think one of those two.
they
But
are-
it went to Canada.
But don't forget, they're all a part of the Commonwealth. I mean, they're like states to us. Canada is a part of the British Commonwealth, and so is Australia, and so is Wales and Scotland. There's
Okay, gotcha.
so
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
like, if you compare it to our system, they're like states in a union.
But not under one government, though, because a government in England doesn't control Canada.
but the
they're
crown,
like good.
the crown of the Commonwealth is who is in charge of putting in place the government in that state. They serve at the pleasure of the king and queen. Now, the king and queen don't issue orders anymore, but the hierarchy of how a government is formed hasn't changed. It's still the same, and it still falls under the crown of the King of England. But for all practical purposes, they have plenty of autonomy as a separate entity. All of the states of the Commonwealth do. But yeah, I mean, right off the bat, the greatest president who's going to save us from Trump is already being sued by the world. And it won't stop there. So this was good, and we probably talked about this, but it didn't get talked about a lot. Is Antifa went right back to rioting. The night of the inauguration, they were carrying signs saying we didn't want Biden either, and were rioting and creating violence again. And
That was Seattle. I think you were talking about Portland, Seattle.
Yeah. Now, why wasn't that bad? If the riot they supposedly had in D.C. the week previous was so horrible, why is it now okay? When Biden's president, riots are safe, but when Trump is president, riots are dangerous. I mean, what?
Right.
What do you do with this? This is idiocy.
One is because it was before the inauguration where they officially got Biden in. One is now it's afterwards. It's fine, whatever. We'll deal with it. And it's their group of people. But I called my son, Casey, because he lives in Seattle. And I wanted to know were there riots? I didn't hear anything on the news. Very few people talk about it. You brought it up last time, but you said there wasn't any confirmation in the mainstream news. But then it did trickle out a little bit in the news. Now, my son Casey said he didn't really hear of anything in Seattle even, and they're far enough, I guess, where they wouldn't really know about it. But
in the days after,
made a big deal.
It slowly came out. I mean, now they never reported it, but now they talk about it like it happened, but they didn't report it happening. That
is extremely effective too.
Yeah,
you wait a few days and you report something that it kind of happened back then, but on the Capitol siege, just like man, it was every second, every moment was going on. It makes it more serious feeling. Yeah. Interesting.
Let's see. Right off the bat, he created through executive order a mask mandate on all federal property, which he and his family and his friends immediately broke.
Right, he broke it while he was doing the thing. Right, he wasn't even wearing a mask while he was signing the thing, which was in a federal building.
He another executive order is now set up so that illegal immigrants can be counted in the census. So that
hold on 1 second. Let's go back to this mask thing again, because
you're like the mask Nazi, the anti-mask Nazi,
the unmasked Nazi, right? I need a big shirt that just has a mask and a line through it. I went to a restaurant the other day though, and I just walked in. The lady's like, mask. I said, I have a personal medical issue, and I just walked in.
And what'd she say? They just ignore it.
They're like dumbfounded.
Well, in Virginia, in Virginia,
you can't ask me what it is because they're HIPAA regulations. I can't tell you my medical history. So what are you going to do?
Well, and sometimes they won't follow the law. I went to Grand Piano's, their little discount warehouse that's over there near the city dump downtown off of Orange Avenue, and as we walked in, they said I needed to have a mask, and I tried the same thing you did. It wasn't. No, they said no. The governor says everybody has to wear a mask, and I'm like, no, unless you have a medical issue. And they were like, but if you're going to come in, you have to have a mask. So they weren't following the law.
Well, and so here's my thing about not participating anymore. Now it's tough when you need to get something, but what I would do is I would say that, and then if they would say what they do, I'd say, thank you very much. Do you know of another restaurant? And I would just walk out the door. So if they're the owner, now a lot of times they're not the owner. They're just a minimum
this was
wage
just
person
a commission-based salesperson.
I got you. But my thing is, hey, I'll try it, but I don't need to participate. I don't need anything that bad.
No,
I'm gonna do it. So.
They wanted to try to talk to me to convince me as to why they were right, that I had to wear a mask no matter what. And I said, you're wrong. I'm not going to convince you you're wrong. I'm just going to go. So we left. It was fine. And honestly, if we were operating our country the proper way, then that's a private business and private property. They are supposed to have the right to not give me service for whatever reason they want. They don't have to give an explanation. They're
Right.
private people. If they don't want me shopping in their store, they, as property owners, as free citizens, they have every right to say, we don't want you here. We're not going to sell you anything. Just move on along. Mask, no mask, that doesn't have anything to do with it. Now
Yeah,
that ship,
I agree with you.
now that
Right.
ship sailed.
And you would have the opportunity to go to another place and get the service
Yeah.
because they would be willing to let you
But
in.
we don't.
Well, all I'm waiting for the one person that dies from wearing a mask, specifically that their own infection got back into their mouth or whatever, and they died. I'm waiting for that one.
There
so that
probably
we
have
can
been
just
plenty
do away
of
with
them,
this.
but they counted them as COVID deaths.
Yeah, that's true.
Um,
All
so
right, enough of my blathering on this mask thing.
now he'd been promising. Biden had been now. First, Biden promised he wasn't going to shut down fracking and he wasn't going to shut down the Keystone Pipeline. He's on record saying both of those things, and he's now done the exact opposite. But it's okay. It's okay when Democrats lie, right? You know, it's
Right. They don't have to follow
the
through.
media is not out there today hammering him for lying during the campaign because they don't care. They just wanted him to be president. They're not gonna be hold their chosen president to a standard. It's just gonna go. Let's see. So he promised student loan forgiveness. That's all. That's off the table, which is good because that shouldn't happen.
Correct.
But the point is, he lies. It's perfectly okay. Let's see. He got rid of the Trump administration's order that was setting price caps on insulin. Remember that?
Yes.
And remember how much the Democrats hammered Trump. So he ended up doing it. And now their Democrat president has undone it. It was so important to Democrats that the government control price of insulin that now that they're in charge, they've gotten rid of it. Now, again, this is another one of those areas. The government should have no authority whatsoever over what the cost of insulin is or the cost of anything. The federal government is not given the authority to set prices in the private sector on the market. There's
Amen.
no language in the Constitution for that. But they do it, and that's one of the reasons why we have so much trouble with everything is because we're artificially applying controls to things that are supposed to be free people engaging in commerce.
Right. And if you let free people engage in free commerce, you'll get plenty of competitors, and it'll bring the price down to exactly what it should be in the marketplace. It may not be an agreeable price to you, but it is what the price is. I would like everything for free. That's not what things cost.
So the next one's a biggie. You recall that Trump put an order in to block the Chinese from being involved in the management and construction of our power grids, our power systems across the country. Well, without much fanfare, Biden got rid of that.
Yep.
Biden wants the Chinese to take over our power systems. Because, having your energy be beholden to another country that hates you, that's a great idea. This guy, I tell you what, Biden is a brainiac. He's got it all figured out. This man,
Well, it's interesting.
where's he been all our lives?
I know it. Greg, on this issue, it's been interesting because in the 70s and 80s and 90s, we were beholden to the Arab countries that hated us with our oil. Now, it seems like in the recent years, we've let go of that and we become energy independent. And now we're not beholden to those oil-producing countries in the Middle East. So we've let that go, but now we're giving the renewable energy sources over to a enemy of ours like China. So we've just traded one enemy for another for our main source of things getting done, which is energy. Yes. Now that's definitely contrived and a purposeful thing.
Oh, sure.
That is scary to me because that grid and China seems to be, they are so focused on our destruction. And with a dictatorship,
Well, and
those kinds of things.
they're focused on their supremacy. And for them to be the supreme
Yeah.
power of the world, they have to take us down. It's just the dynamics of how it works.
Yeah.
But now that we're on the issue of China, let's talk about China. Just 2 days ago, 8 bombers, 4 fighters, a submarine hunter breached Taiwan's air defense and the Taiwan identification zone. They crossed the Taiwan Strait. And did we help our buddies out? Did we keep the Chinese in check? No, we let them run roughshod over that. They're testing us now because they've been wanting to invade Taiwan for a long time. And even the crappy presidents we've had have understood the long-term effects of the expansion of China's military power. But Biden, who's probably in bed with the Chinese, I mean, they probably helped him get elected. There's some,
I would think so.
There's some, I'll do this for you. You do this for me. We're buds. Biden's okay with that. So they're feeling their oats now. Can you imagine being a Taiwanese citizen and staring?
Look at Hong Kong. Look at Taiwan. Yeah.
Well,
I know it.
And they're not going to treat Taiwan the way they treated Hong Kong. I mean, as rough as they were to the protesters in Hong Kong, that's nothing compared to what they will do when they finally invade Taiwan. It's not going to be water hoses.
You know, it would be an interesting show for us to really get into the whole China thing, because I definitely do look at China with their, it used to be Russia at one time, but Russia seems so inept. I mean, they seem good on like espionage and killing and all that, but their economy and stuff like that is just nothing. But China is a producer of things, manufacturing. They're a mover. They've got, the 1.3 billion people, whatever they got. I mean, they got huge numbers. That's a scary one.
They're the producer of our things.
Yes, the producer of our things.
We already have critical life necessary components that are being made in China. That was never a good idea. Another one of those things that me having conversations on the radio years and years ago when all that was ramping up, it's frustrating to watch us do everything you would do if you wanted to destroy your civilization. That's driving me absolutely batty. I've watched it go on for 30 years, and people older than me watched it go on. It's like we've been on this 150-year march, to destroy all this. Well,
it is true that when you look at the globe, this is what's going to happen, right? Everybody's going to come after the top dog or the one area that is mostly free versus them, right? Because China can't keep having this quote unquote beacon of light out there that we should be shining all the time, because the people will keep looking at America and comparing China. So they got to bring us down. They got to level. Everything's got to level out.
But people in China don't think we're a shining whatever. People in China don't know. They have no idea what goes on because the media is completely controlled by the party. A good friend of mine is married to a Chinese national, and I've had long discussions about what they know and what they think. You would not believe the nonsense that Chinese people believe. Yeah. Now, I'm not picking on the Chinese, because most people don't believe the nonsense that Americans believe. Our media isn't owned by the government, but it's just as full of crap as their media.
Right.
We got, the difference is over there, if you say something different, they kill you. Over here, if you say something different, they terminate your social media platforms, and they don't allow credit cards charges for you. That's step one. But they'll eventually, over here, we'll eventually getting around to killing people who are saying something different than the government once said. We'll get there. That's where this always goes. That's just history. It's how it works. Gas up 50 cents a gallon immediately. I got $1.89 gas a gallon gas before the inauguration. 3 days later, I drive past that same gas station. It's $2.29. Just that one station. In other places, it's up even more. In some places, 75 cents. in just 48 hours.
Yeah, because they're thinking of what's going to happen.
Well, you
People
know,
are planning on.
personally, I'll pay more for gas if it means that there's not somebody in the White House saying mean things on Twitter. If it only costs me 50 cents more a gallon for gas so that Trump won't say things that hurts people's feelings, it's all worth it, right?
Greg, you're such an understanding guy. I can't believe that what's inside of you.
Oh,
That's
geez.
really impressive of you.
I'm at a loss.
I know it.
All right, we're coming up on an hour, so we need to wrap up for everybody. We did get some comments about the audio sounding good. I solved the audio problem, so it should sound pretty good. Let's see if we got any questions we need to answer real quick before we take off. Star City Fame says one of us is a bureaucratic guy. I think that can't be me. That's got to be you.
What could I possibly be saying that I'm oh, you know what it is? I think they're thinking because I kind of want to work in the system that we have. And that is a great discussion about how do you fix some of these things. Do you want to blow it up and start all over? Or are you trying to find a way through the system to get it to work? And I think that's a great discussion. I think that's a discussion that is on everybody's mind. You can't, but I just feel that way. You can't blow it up. We're going to be right back in the same situation.
Thanks everybody for being with us this morning. If you missed in or came late, this will be available on the channel to watch whenever. And we'll be back Thursday morning at 10.
Yep, sounds great.
Awesome. Thanks, Al.
You got it, my friend.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.